there are new legends who've written their name in Newcastle folklore.
From the first minute on, they knew they could win that trophy yesterday. First half, they were astonishing. It was one-way traffic.
So many heroes, brilliant story with Big Dan Burn. I thought Tino Livramento kept Mo Salah in his pocket.
What about Mo Salah? Didn't make an impression really in the game against PSG. Didn't make an impression here.
His record in cup finals is not great either, is it?
1 goal in 9 cup finals for club and country.
It sort of belies the fact that he's the man for the big occasion.
It was a triumph for Eddie Howe.
I think he has proven that he is right now the best English coach that we have.
And I think this win will give them the confidence and the belief to go on and get a top 5 finish.
They thoroughly deserved it. I mean, I think personally it's quite refreshing to see another team win a trophy other than one of the usual boys that do win it.
This is about Eddie Howe, his players and those Newcastle fans.
Well, I tell you what, Sam Fender, Anton Deck, Alan Shearer, Paul Gascoigne, everybody who works in the Newcastle Brown Ale factory, they are dealing with one hell of a hangover this morning because that was an unbelievable seismic day for Newcastle United Football Club. It's been 70 years since a domestic trophy, but 56 years since the last time that they won any sort of trophy. And actually, Crook and I spent a lot of time up in Newcastle last year, and that Fairs Cup means a lot to them, doesn't it, Crook? So we shouldn't just sort of brush that under the carpet, because that was like the old UEFA Cup.
It was, and we remember Bob Moncur joining us on stage in Whitley Bay, brought his medal, didn't he? Obviously still proud of that achievement, and now there are new legends who've written their name in Newcastle folklore. There was that big poster from War Flags, wasn't there, before the game, write your name in the history books, and the class of 2025 have certainly done that, and they deserved it. I thought they were by far the better team. I thought physically they were more than a match for Liverpool. I thought probably they've showed more heart and desire than Liverpool did. And tactically, not for the first time, Eddie Howe has come up with a quite brilliant game plan. He did it in the semi-finals against Arsenal as well. And they were deserving winners. So many heroes. Brilliant story with Big Dan Burn. I thought Tino Livramento kept Mo Salah in his pocket. The midfield trio, and particularly the 2 Brazilians, were terrific as well. So heroes all over the pitch. Kieran Trippier, who came up and gave me a warm embrace after the game. I thought, considering there's been some detractors to him this season, is he getting on a bit? Maybe should Newcastle let him go? Again, I thought he turned up when they needed him most, and Pope, the goalkeeper, as well. They were all brilliant.
Absolutely terrific performances all over the pitch from Newcastle United. And it had to be like that, Terry, didn't it? It had to be that last moment, nerves jangling across the entire northeast and all through the west end of Wembley. The late Liverpool goal given by VAR, and that meant that there needed to be a 6-minute scrum for the ball down by the corner flag, in which Joe Willock, Callum Wilson and Tino Livramento basically took it in turns to try and sit on it and not allow it out of that 5-yard square area down in the Liverpool right fullback position.
Do you know what, Sam and Alex? I was watching the game, obviously, and about 10 minutes to go, you could see them congregating around the bench. The supporters were in celebration mode. And I was thinking, you've gone too early, chaps. Please don't go too early. And when Chiesa gets the goal, you're thinking that the worst for Newcastle and their fans. But they thoroughly deserved it. I mean, I think personally it's quite refreshing to see another team win a trophy other than one of the usual boys that do win it, because it kind of gives the competition more importance if someone different wins it, and we see how it rejuvenates a city like Newcastle. I was in London last night working, and on my way home there were Geordies everywhere around, and sort of not just near Wembley and not just in central London, but on the outskirts of London. They come down in their thousands because it's not something that they do on a regular basis. I remember going to a Man City game a few years back, and they were saying, "Oh, I'm not going to go to League Cup final. I'm going to wait for this fight. I'm going to wait for the FA Cup final." They wasn't even in it. And I can remember a time when Man City never went to Wembley, for a long period of time. So people, the big club supporters, they get blasé about playing in semi-finals and finals at Wembley. It's only the League Cup. It's not the FA Cup, or it's not the Champions League final. So to see the Geordies embrace it in the way that they did, again, coming down, and to think that they won their first trophy for 70 years is ridiculous. Jackie Milburn was amongst the scorers when they, there's no bigger hero in the North East than Jackie Milburn. And there he was one of the last scorers in their last final. So it was fantastic.
It really was, and it's great for Newcastle United. It's great for the city. I think Liverpool. I said this during the commentary actually, just before the start of the game. You looked at the Newcastle fans. Every single one of them had gone for the choreographed scarf above their head, or the club had left a black and white scarf on the seat for every single supporter, and they'd all gone for it. They'd all picked it up. They'd all done what they were supposed to do. As the players came out, held it aloft. It looked a picture away to our right-hand side where we were just on the halfway line. And to our left, the Liverpool fans looked comfortable. We've been here before. We've done it, whatever. It was a special day. But Newcastle made it really uncomfortable for Liverpool right from the very start. They were in their faces. They were physically bossing that midfield area. I thought they were absolutely terrific all over the park. You mentioned Salah being quiet. Livramento was absolutely superb. I thought Barnes did really well in the first half. Murphy was excellent. But there's a few new heroes. Obviously, the Dan Burn story is a terrific one. Rejected, went down the leagues, worked in Asda, ended up going back through the leagues, now back at his hometown club, called up for England, scores a crucial goal in the cup final. You couldn't write it. If you did write it, your editor would throw it away and say, that's too fanciful. And then, of course, there's Alexander Isak, who is a genuine Swedish superstar and now a Geordie legend. 100 appearances. He scored more goals in the first 100 appearances for Newcastle United than Jackie Milburn, Len White and Alan Shearer. And he is on the way to getting himself a little statue alongside Eddie Howe, I think.
And a Geordie accent, I noticed. A little bit of a Geordie twang in his accent.
He's gone full Jan Mulby on us. Yeah, we've not even spoken about Eddie Howe, have we? And I don't know about you, Sam, but I got quite emotional after the game, pitch side, watching Eddie and his assistant, Jason Tyndall, Stephen Purchase, players, managers, coaches rather, that I knew as players at Bournemouth down in the lower divisions. And I covered Bournemouth when Eddie Howe got his first managerial break. And not only was he trying to keep the football club in the Football League, he was trying to keep them in business. He took his first managerial job in his 30s. His playing career had been cut short by injury. And he was told, look, if you don't keep us up, we're going to fold the football club. No pressure. And you look at where he was then and where he is now, I think it's been an incredible journey. He won't give himself the credit because he's not that type of character. I called him a humble hero on social media last night. But his is a brilliant story of hard work, dedication and determination in its own right. And I think it's great for British coaches. The first English manager since Harry Redknapp to win a major Wembley final since 2008. And I think we needed this. British coaches needed this. There's only 2 English managers in the Premier League now, him and Graham Potter. So fantastic for Eddie and great for the Newcastle fans. There are going to be detractors. We have to talk about the elephant in the room, and there are people who will talk about the ownership. But it wasn't really about the owners. A bit disappointing, actually. The owner went up and played a part in the celebrations. But this is about Eddie Howe, his players, and those Newcastle fans.
Yeah, I got a little bit emotional. I mean, I'll declare an interest. I mean, look, I wouldn't say I was biased in any way yesterday because I'm not really worried about the result, but I am worried about him because he's a long-term friend. I've known him for 22 years since he was a player at Portsmouth. Him, Richard Hughes, who's the sporting director of Liverpool, so I have an interest there as well. Are friends, and I've known them for a very, very long time. They were players at Portsmouth. Eddie was injured from pretty much the 4th minute of his debut for most of his Portsmouth career. Richard probably played more games. Actually, Richard did a really good job in central midfield for Portsmouth and played a big part in a victory over Manchester United once upon a time. And look, the truth is that he's always been a great guy. He's always been a friendly guy. He's always been approachable and someone who you can get on with. But he has developed as a man manager and a tactician, basically on the job. He took that role at Bournemouth at 32, not having had any coaching experience whatsoever, and was sent down basically a coal mine, trying desperately to find some sort of jewels to keep Bournemouth alive. And he didn't just keep them alive, he took them all the way through the division. Now, I spent many years defending him because people have taken pot shots at him because of the Burnley experience. Sometimes managers and clubs don't fit. It's the wrong time. There was a personal situation there as well, which at that time didn't help him. So there was a load of different factors as to why that job didn't turn out okay. But then he went back to Bournemouth and done an even better job, took them into the Premier League, sustained them in the Premier League. And I think when they got relegated from the Premier League, people sort of again turned their back on him and thought he was this or he was that. But I think he has proven that he is right now the best English coach that we have. And it is great for English coaches, Terry, because without a success story like that, there is very little for the young coaches coming up and coming through to hang their hat on.
Yeah, 100%. And the Newcastle supporters will be mightily relieved that he didn't get the job this time. And he wasn't even seriously considered by the sounds of it, which is amazing. He's the obvious choice to be England manager in the future. And yesterday I had to look at the tactics were great, but it was the attitude of the players. Now it's not easy for any coach to give your players that belief going into a cup final when you're heavy underdogs. You're playing against a team this season in Liverpool have beaten everybody. They're winning the league comfortably. Massive advantage for Liverpool, or so they should have been. To instill that belief in his players, which he clearly did, because from the first minute on, they knew they could win that trophy yesterday. And the reason being for this, Eddie's a former player. He's played many games midweek, many games at the weekend. And when Liverpool had PSG in the week and Newcastle had a free week to prepare, they've done all their preparation on the training pitch. But he knows the importance of that first 20 minutes of imposing yourself on the opposition who maybe are not feeling as sharp and as fit as you. People do, when they have these players have these games, people think the next game is going to be, the end of the match is going to be a problem. Trust me, it's nice, the first 20 minutes. You know, you're shaking the effect of the midweek game out of your legs. You're feeling a little bit tired. The many a game I went into where you're even in the warm-up, you're thinking, Christ, I feel stiff today. My hamstrings are still tight from the other night. And you don't even get through the first 20 minutes on adrenaline. You are just literally warming up. And I think that Newcastle and Eddie Howe realised if we were going to impose ourselves on this match, it's important we do it in the first minutes of the game. That might be winning a tackle. It might be putting the ball in behind for Alexander Isak to chase. It might be winning numerous tackles. And they did that. The first half, they were astonishing. It was one-way traffic. I mean, the amount of times they could have scored, they created chances, the amount of times they dispossessed Liverpool players, the amount of times they won 50-50 challenges. And all that reeked of the fact that Eddie Howe knew that it might take Liverpool a little while to get in this game. And if we have a slow start, if we sit off, if we drop deep, and we let Liverpool, warm themselves up, get into this match and play at the tempo they want to play, then it might be difficult. So we're going to get at them from the first minute. They all the set pieces. I mean, when Dan Burn scores the header, that was about the third time he'd won a header from a corner. And when you look at it, Alexis McAllister was marking him. I mean, he's a fantastic player. He's a World Cup winner. I think he's a brilliant player. But you're not putting Alexis McAllister marking Dan Burn at a corner. Now, the only reason I can think of that is because Dan Burn was so deep. I mean, he scores his goal from 12 yards out. And yet they're probably thinking, well, he's not a problem there. We're smothering the goalkeeper. We're going to defend the 6-yard box. You cannot leave Dan Burn. So whether, Eddie Howe looked at that and thought that this might happen if we put Dan Burn here, if we deliver the set pieces here. I mean, Dan Burn's a big old lad. So you want your biggest player. I mean, that's got to be the two you're marking, Dan Burn and Isak are the two obvious ones. Joe Linton can be a threat as well, but I wouldn't say particularly great in the air. But Isak is, and Dan Burn is. So why Liverpool didn't mark them better than what they did, I have no idea. But that's how Eddie Howe won this game. He needed his team to have a good start. It was a triumph for Eddie Howe because of the way that he started the game, the way his team played. And then that belief grew and grew throughout the game. It was only dented when Liverpool scored. And then, then it was panic stations. But it was fantastic to see Newcastle win it.
Obviously, we have the statistics up when we're doing the commentary. And I thought the first half was really interesting because, you had Liverpool and you have Liverpool one side, Newcastle one side, and you have a graph of the statistics. And you had nothing on the Liverpool side and all the attacking statistics on the Newcastle side were starting to bulge up. And you had literally zeros by the Liverpool indications for shots on goal, shots off target, corners, everything. It was bizarre in that first 45 minutes. But also you had a situation with the corners where it took them until the sixth corner that Newcastle had before they decided that actually we better put Jarrell Quansah on Dan Burn because he's having too much of an influence here. Very, very strange indeed. But I think that's because, as Lee Clark said to us, they were marking sort of half zonally, half man for man. And as a result of that, Dan Burn was was, as you said, outside the sort of sphere of the zonal influence, and that's when the other players that are not dealing with those higher balls are supposed to go out and meet them. So that's the reason. What about Mo Salah? Didn't make an impression really in the game against PSG. Didn't make an impression here. I mean, I don't know how many touches he had of the football, but he hardly kicked it in the first half, and certainly in the second half, his influence was very limited.
Well, you gave me a bit of a stick last week, didn't I? Because you threw stats back at me when I said that a Liverpool fan that I was speaking to at Cheltenham suggested that he's having his usual flat spot towards the back end of the season. But his record in cup finals is not great either. Is it 1 goal in his last 7 cup finals for Mo Salah? So,
yeah, 1 goal in 9 cup finals for club and country.
No, there you go. So that sort of belies the fact that he's the man for the big occasion. I think you've already mentioned it. I mentioned it as well. You've got to credit Tino Livramento and Harvey Barnes for how hard they work down that side to keep Kwanzaa Penn back and to stop Salah getting any real supply. But it's a concern for Liverpool. I think they've got a big enough lead at the top of the table that this stumbling run of form they're in, and they weren't great against Southampton in their last league game, is not going to stop them winning that trophy. But they do need their top players fit and firing soon because, as Arne Slot said to me, that they're not taking it for granted yet. There's still 9 big games to go. And Arsenal are just about hanging in there, aren't they?
Just about, because they were victorious yesterday. We'll come on to that very shortly. The impact on Liverpool can't be underestimated, though, because, like Crook said, there are still 9 big games to go, and they do feel as if they've sort of got to this. They've limped to this international break, Terry. They're going to need some of their players, actually, to sort of somehow try and find a little bit of a refresher. But most of them will be jetting off all over the globe. There's lots of them going to South America. There's others going off to other international teams. I mean, if you're Arne Slot, the last thing you want, actually, is an international break now. Is it?
I don't know. I mean, it might be time for a reset, which does allow the international break, does allow that. It wasn't too long ago they knocked out the FA Cup. And then the trauma of losing to PSG in a competition where you probably thought, well, we've got the league wrapped up. We can concentrate and focus on the Champions League. That's where Liverpool's history has been built on winning league titles and European Cups and Champions League. And then for it to be knocked out of that and to come into the League Cup final and get beat, it probably is a good time for an international break for Arne Slot and for Liverpool. So they can do a kind of reset. They'll win the league. I've no doubt about that. And referring to Mo Salah, just when you've achieved the numbers he has this season, everybody expects you to do that every single game. But that is it's quite a depressing stat that for Mo Salah, in terms of scoring goals in cup finals. But as I say, the expectation levels rise when you have a season like he has, but he's had a career like he has. He's your go-to player, which in turn means that Newcastle and Eddie Howe and Livramento and whoever's helping him, that's why they had a game plan. It shouldn't be that hard. I mean, you're doubling up on their best player, at least. You're trying to stop the supply of passes to him. You're going to use 2 players against him rather than 1 because he has such an impact on Liverpool. Take away Mo Salah's goals, they're not winning the league. Clearly not winning the league this year. So it comes with the territory when you're as good as Mo Salah that you are going to be a heavy feature in any team's game plan when they play you.
What happens next with Newcastle United? They've got a Conference League place for next season, but they might end up getting into the Champions League as well. They've got to refocus and sort of try and make sure they don't miss an opportunity to get into the top 5 because Chelsea and Manchester City both dropped points this weekend. Do they do their celebration now, next week after the international break is over? When do they do it, Crook? And do they get it out of their system or do they wait till the end of the campaign? What's the rules on that?
Well, knowing Eddie as we do, I think he'd rather have it at the end of the season, and allow them to fully focus on trying to get one of those Champions League places. I think the international break has come at a perfect time for them because I spoke to Bruno Guimaraes in the tunnel after the game and I said, you're going to have a good party tonight. He said, well, not too much of a party. I've got a 6 a.m. flight to Brazil to catch. And we see it time and again, don't we, that particularly when an underdog wins a big cup final, they can fall flat in their next league game after the Lord Mayor's show. Maybe the celebrations take their toll. So I think the fact they've got a gap before they play Brentford at home, that's going to be a hell of an occasion at St James's Park, I think will help them. And I think this win will give them the confidence and the belief to go on and get a top 5 finish. Certainly that was the message from Bruno Guimaraes. I'm ambitious. The journey starts here. We want to play in the Champions League. We want to win bigger honours. And I'm sure that will be Eddie Howe's focus as well.
Okay, so in which case, let's think about the impact of the trophy and what it does next for them, because there are incidents of one-time glory merchants from the League Cup, and it gives you a great day, and you put it on the mantelpiece, and you remember it forever. But you don't build on that success. Birmingham City, Swansea, back in the day, Tottenham Hotspur, going back into 2009. So what happens next? Terry, can Newcastle use this as a platform to build on? Are they going to be like Chelsea from 2005 under Jose Mourinho? They put it on the mantelpiece and then build upon it, or is it going to be a scenario a bit like the sort of Swansea Birmingham thing, where it is just a one-off?
No, Newcastle United are too big for that. They're a genuine big club. I mean, you look at the fan base; it was different for Swansea. It was different for other clubs that have won a one-off cup. That normally when that happens to a team like that, bigger and better and stronger clubs come and take their best players. They're not going to be able to do that with Newcastle unless the player wants to leave and all that stuff. So it's not going to be, a situation where the players of Newcastle think we've won a trophy now. So-and-so club is going to buy me. They're going to take me. I'm going to get a move up the ladder. No, you can be fulfilled as a professional footballer playing for a big club like Newcastle United. So I think as long as they keep Eddie Howe in the future, which is clearly going to happen now, I think that it can see them. I mean, they win the game in hand, they go fourth. We're talking about top 5 now for the Champions League next year. That's got to be the aim for Newcastle. And there's plenty for them to play for between now and the end of the season. In an ideal world, it would have been a normal routine week. They wouldn't have a game till next weekend. They could have done the celebrations, gone back to the city, done all what you do when you win a trophy, and then refocus. But as Alex said, players were jetting off to international duty. Dan Burn has had the week of his life in terms of his football career. Yeah, he's probably meeting up with England players today. So it's going to be quite surreal for those players that play for Newcastle United in that final yesterday, and winning final. They're not going to get a chance to celebrate. Back to work today and tomorrow for winning international teams. There'll be one or two that haven't travelled on international duty that can sit down and take it all in. But they've got a job to do between now and the end of the season now. And it could be a fairy tale story for Newcastle United, winning the League Cup, winning their first trophy in 70 years and finishing in the Champions League spot, because 5th place is probably going to do it. As I say, the game in hand now, if they win that, they go 4th. So suddenly there's a few teams. It's not just Newcastle. There's quite a few teams now eyeing up the situation, thinking, well, we had top 4 in mind. Now it's changed. It definitely has changed. It's going to be the top 5.
So it is going to be the top 5. I'm going to lay it on the line now. It is 100% going to be the top 5 that get a Champions League play. So you might hear sort of like, oh, the coefficient, blah, 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 blah. But let me just explain to you the situation that generates the extra, the place. Basically, the way the system works, that one English team has to win a quarter-final game. Not a tie, a game. So one English team wins a quarter-final game, and then they are uncatchable. The thing is here is we've got not only Aston Villa and Arsenal in the quarterfinals, this applies to the whole of Europe. So you've got Manchester United, Tottenham and Chelsea. All they've got to do between the 5 of them is win one game, and then the 5th place is guaranteed. They will do that, I promise you. So there will be 5 places in the Champions League. At least it could be as many as 7 should Aston Villa win the whole thing and finish outside the competition, and Manchester United or Tottenham win the Europa League, which would be quite remarkable. So that's great for English football, and it's great for Newcastle United as well, I would have thought. Good for Chelsea and for Nottingham Forest, who are also chasing those places, and Man City as well dropped points at the weekend. So let's get stuck into the Premier League action. Arsenal 1, Chelsea 0. I mean, Arsenal were a cracking price to beat Chelsea on Sunday, weren't they? I mean, it was about as obvious as you could get that they were going to do it as well, bearing in mind that Chelsea didn't have Cole Palmer, who is injured and he's going to miss the England internationals, Crook.
Yeah, and I think that's not a massive surprise when you look at his recent form. I think it's been quite obvious that he's not been fully fit and obviously not getting the best out of him. Chelsea, and that in turn has had a detrimental effect on their form, particularly away from home. No wins in 7 in the Premier League, away now 5 defeats, 2 draws, and they're looking shaky, aren't they? And I think probably Arsenal were more comfortable than the 1-0 scoreline suggested yesterday. Probably could have won by more. Mikel Arteta, I think, a little bit patronising on Chelsea when he described them as the best attacking team in the league after the game because they looked anything but in North London yesterday.
Yes, that might have been tongue-in-cheek, I think, bearing in mind just having a look at the statistics. They had 2 shots on target, Terry.
Yeah, and it's what we kind of expected from 2 teams that didn't have a centre forward amongst them. Mikel Merino scores the winning goal from a corner routine at the near post. Chelsea missing Nicholas Jackson, missing Cole Palmer. It kind of was the game I was believing it was going to be. And, it's tough for Arsenal. They're going through a situation where they haven't got a striker. So making do with Mikel Merino. I keep hearing Arsenal supporters saying, how can you make a defensive midfielder as a centre forward? He's never been a defence. I don't know what Arsenal supporters thought they bought. He's not ever in a million years been a holding midfielder. He's a left-sided midfielder.
He's a physical midfielder. He's always been a physical midfielder, but he's always been an aerial threat, hasn't he? I mean, he's always had that propensity to cause problems in opposition boxes.
And he arrives late in the penalty box. He has that ability, that knack of doing that, arriving late, arriving unmarked and getting in the box. And he's capable of scoring goals. An aerial threat, yes. Is he a centre forward? No. He's certainly not a defensive midfielder. So I've seen criticism from Arsenal fans saying, he's not what we thought he was going to be. We thought he was going to be this and that. No, Arteta clearly knew what they were buying. Really good player, a creative attacking midfielder who's a force to be reckoned with when he gets in the box. But he's not a centre forward. He's doing his best. The Arsenal drought from corners came to an end just in the nick of time. I think David Raya nearly made a good job of making it on level terms with that shot that squirmed through his hands. And have you ever seen a more relieved footballer when you looked at him and it was just trickling past the post and it just went
Couldn't
past
believe
the
it,
post?
could he?
See him puff of the cheeks and all his teammates patted him on the back and shook his hand. And I thought, you've got away with one there. But that was Chelsea's best opportunity. They didn't have any opportunities. So
no, that was it.
Yeah, I don't know why Mikel Arteta said that about the best attacking team.
He was just winding them up. He was winding them up, wasn't he? And listen, fair play if that's what you want to do. I mean,
but it was after the game. There's no need to wind them up after the game.
I know, but it's Chelsea Arsenal, isn't it? It's just the way it is. It's a little bit of needle. Chelsea were poor, really, in the first half against Copenhagen in the Conference League. They were absolutely no match for Arsenal. Anyone that thought they were going to be would have been incredibly surprised. It's the first of 3 big games, actually, for Enzo Maresca, who I think is wandering into a little bit of trouble here because they've got Tottenham next. And bearing in mind that basically this is how Tottenham operate, right? So Tottenham have good result, bad result, good result, bad result, good result, bad result. Like that's just how they work, right? So the next game is against Chelsea. So you know what's happening next, right? So Tottenham are going to win that game. And then Chelsea have Brentford. So, it's all this talk, and I had it last week, and everyone's saying to me, they're going to finish in the top 4. Chelsea, look, they're in the top 4 already. Yeah, they're in the top 4 because they've just played West Ham, Wolves, Leicester and Southampton. Wait till the next set of fixtures. And they've got Nottingham Forest, Newcastle and Liverpool before the end of the season as well, plus Tottenham and Brentford in the next couple of games. So let's see where they are at the end of the season. But I will probably be quite comfortable in suggesting they'll finish outside the top 5, especially if Nicholas Jackson doesn't get fit quickly and if Cole Palmer doesn't recover. Because basically, I mean, I was reading the quotes from Enzo Maresca saying, it was in training yesterday. Yeah, all right. No one believes that. He's basically been carrying something for the last couple of weeks because he's been flogged, right?
Yeah, because they're Cole Palmer FC. And listen, we could do a whole podcast on Chelsea's transfer strategy. They've obviously committed to a massive money deal for a teenager from Portugal, slightly less money for another teenager from Portugal. And then you hear that they're going to sell 7 or 8 players this summer to revamp the squad again. I don't understand the methodology.
Who they're going to sell?
I don't get it. These sporting
they can't
directors
even fill the bench, Crook. They had 2 goalkeepers on the bench yesterday.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the only reason they are as high as they are in the table is because teams like United and Spurs, and maybe Villa to a lesser extent, have dropped off so much this season. Villa are obviously distracted by the Champions League. And if they still don't get in the top 4 or 5, has Maresca done any better than Pochettino did? I'd say no.
I remember last year standing in the tunnel with Noni Madueke, and I said to him, you didn't come to Chelsea to finish 10th. And they were 11th at the time. I said, so, how disappointing has the season been? And this was around about this time of the year, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe February time. And he said to me, we ain't going to finish in the bottom half of the table. He said, "You wait, we'll be finishing right up there." And I went, "Okay." Didn't really think that much of it. And they did. They ended up having such a strong end to the season that they ended up finishing in the top 6 and they got into the Conference League. They would have played Europa League football if it hadn't have been for Manchester United winning the FA Cup at the end of May. So, but this season I got the feeling that actually it's the other way round. Okay, they had a far better start to the campaign than anyone anticipated. And they're going to have a massive drop-off now between now and the end of the season. I mean, listen, I fear it, but I can see it coming, Terry.
Yeah, that's the pessimism in most football supporters regarding the team that they support. You were saying about Spurs winning the game, losing the game, winning the game, losing the game. They've lost 15 in the league this year, so they haven't won 15. So that's not entirely right. And that's the pessimism from being a supporter of a team that you feel a little bit downbeat on. But it is incredible that Chelsea, with all the money they've spent, still need strengthening in major positions. And you talk about a spine of the team probably needs strengthening. You know, you need a record. If you've only got one centre forward, it's an issue. I mean, it's with the amount of money they've spent, and Nicholas Jackson is out. That's it. They're done. It's ridiculous. The team building. I saw Dario Asugo. I saw that an Asugo linked with Chelsea allegedly have done a deal with him, and I thought, Las Palmas have got a player called Asugo. Surely it's not him. And it is. When he did, what? That player? I didn't know he was on loan. I knew he plays for Las Palmas. I didn't know he was on loan from a Portuguese club. And I literally jokingly thought, that's not the Asugo at Las Palmas, surely. And it was him. So I just, it's beggars belief what these directors of football are doing at clubs.
And that's the situation I think it's worth putting out, right? Okay, so Chelsea fans who are a little bit frustrated, Chelsea fans who are sitting there like upset about what the club is doing is not to do with necessarily what's on the field, although that's not helped over the last couple of weeks because it really has been dull to watch. But it's mainly to do with the fact that Chelsea keeps signing all of these young talents. They've taken a club that was Champions League winners 3 years ago, less than that Club World Cup winners, dismantled that team and rebuilt it badly. And spent so much money in between time, it is mind-boggling. It's obscene the amount of money that they've spent during that period and made the team significantly worse, Crook.
Yeah, and as I say, the sporting directors are playing Championship Manager. They seem determined to trade players and buy and sell players at rapid pace every transfer window. They're obsessed with paying over the odds, in my opinion, for young players in the hope they'll have future sell-on potential. But what they're doing, if they get rid of 7 or 8 players this summer, and I think that's fanciful, by the way, to offload that many, it'll be senior players again. It'll be people like Trevor Chalobah again. And then
they'll sell Chalobah. They'll sell Chalobah. There's no doubt about it. They bought him back from Crystal Palace to inflate his value so that they can sell him in the summer. There's 100% going to happen.
And then you're left with a team of kids trying to compete in a man's league. And it's doomed to failure. It really is. And the reason Maresca is there is because, unlike Pochettino before him, he won't push back on the transfer policy. He's a yes man.
And that is a problem. And this is the other thing about, I know Chelsea fans are getting a little bit of criticism, think about where you've come from, all that kind of stuff. And look, when I first started watching them, they were relegated in a playoff against Middlesbrough. Yeah, we know how bad it was. And the highlight of our entire life was Scott Minto celebrating the FA Cup in 1997. Yes, then we went through a period of success. That's not the situation that Chelsea are railing against. I think that Chelsea's fans are upset because, as you say, it feels like asset trading, not player trading. And they are selling the homegrown talent that the Chelsea fans have had an attachment to. If you go back over the course of... Conor Gallagher has just scored in a European Champions League last 16 derby between Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid. He should be playing for Chelsea. He should be the captain of Chelsea. He isn't. That is frustrating for Chelsea supporters to see. Sorry, it is. I'm just looking at the Tottenham statistics, by the way, Terry, just to make sure that I wasn't talking absolute nonsense. Let's go back to after the Tamworth game, which was drawn, and we know Tottenham, we don't like drawing games, do they? Tottenham,
massive
they hate
win.
drawing games.
Massive win over Tamworth.
Massive win in extra time. In extra time, it was 0-0 full time. So it goes down as a draw. Yeah. They've lost 2, 1-1. Lost 1, 1-2. Lost 2, 1-2, lost 2, drew one, won one, lost one. So maybe the next game might be another loss. It might be. Okay, so Chelsea fans can get excited about that. Talk about Tottenham. They lost to Fulham by 2-0, an uneventful first 45 minutes. It might well have put a glass eye to sleep. But in the second half, Fulham took control, Terry.
Yeah, and now that fifth place is someone like Fulham are the perfect example. I think they're 4 points off of Chelsea. So they're going into the remainder of the season. We know Marco Silva has performed a really good job. They've got a really good team. It's not a fantastic team. They suddenly find themselves in the race for the Champions League. So that's the type of season. They clearly look more motivated than Spurs did. Ange Postecoglou made numerous changes, doesn't keep a winning team. There's an international break coming up. It's not as if he's resting players for the game in midweek or the game next week. It was a bizarre performance from Spurs. It just really, it's all or nothing now in the Europa League. That's it. It's his job rests and depends on it. It's the only race that the players can have any sort of success there is the case they could be in the Champions League if they win the Europa League. It's that bizarre. It's that type of season for them and Man United. But there was no motivation. Too many changes yesterday for the Spurs game, and you can't do 15 games in a season when you've only played 29 games and you've lost 15 of them. It's miserable. It really is. And that performance yesterday was terrible.
And the record is even worse if you actually time it from the day that they lost that game against Chelsea and go to now. It is quite a frightening set of statistics for Ange Postecoglou, really, and actually puts him in quite a low bracket in terms of managerial records at Tottenham Hotspur. Crook, is he under threat?
Yeah, I think he's under big threat. I think if they'd not overturned the first leg defeat against RZ in the Europa League last week, then I think his possession would have almost become untenable. I'm not saying they're going to sack him this season because I think Daniel Levy would look a bit ridiculous doing that and putting Ryan Mason in interim charge for the 68th time. But unless they win the Europa League, I don't see how Postecoglou continues beyond the end of this season. And, some of the stuff he comes out with in the media, as a go at people for criticising with hindsight. It's not hindsight when you've been criticising him since the third month of last season, because, again, I sound like a broken record when it comes to Tottenham. Take away the start that he had, those first 10 games. He's barely won a match in the Premier League. He makes bizarre tactical decisions. He's leaving out players yesterday, presumably to rest them. For what? So they can go away fully refreshed for their country. Honestly, I just don't think he's very good. And it's not hindsight, mate. It's foresight.
Yeah, I mean, it would be good actually if he had seen a little bit of foresight and realised that players get injured if you run them into the ground and ask them to do things that are going to test their very vulnerable hamstrings. Let's talk about Fulham, because you mentioned that there's a possibility that they could get into the top 5 of the Premier League. Well, listen, they've got an opportunity in the FA Cup to get to a semi-final against Crystal Palace. I'm going to do that one when they come back from the international break. Going to be absolutely massive. But after that, they've got 4 games that basically will define their season. So I wonder just how much they are going to put into that Crystal Palace game, because after that they have Arsenal away, Liverpool at home, Bournemouth away, and Chelsea at home. Now, those 4 fixtures will basically tell, if they were to win those 4 fixtures or go unbeaten in those fixtures, Terry, they'd probably end up in the Champions League places.
Well, it's that type of season in the Premier League. You look around and you're doing prep for this and you go, oh, Fulham are 8th. And it was ironic, Ryan Sessegnon scored against Spurs as well yesterday, just to rub salt into it, any wound that Spurs had. But Fulham have the capabilities. They have, as I say, they're a solid team. I don't think they had any aspirations at the start of the season. I'm sure Marco Silva privately thought we can do well this season. We can a top half finish. Now, 9-10 games to go. There's a possibility of playing in the Champions League next year. And they're not alone. There's other clubs just like them that may be looking at it now and definitely thinking, with the coefficient situation, it's top 5. We're looking at a Europa League spot, which was ambitious. Now, I mean, it changes it. Even with the riches available to Premier League clubs, the other aspects of being involved in the Champions League bring a whole new wealth to your club. It's something you're known around Europe. You'll be in the Champions League, that massive table that goes on for the first half of the season. people get to know you around Europe, around the world, and for clubs like Fulham, Bournemouth, Brentford, one or two others, it's a real possibility. So, and
It's
also Crystal
amazing.
Palace, they're going well in the FA Cup. I promise you, they will still take that serious because they're not a million miles away from a trip to Wembley.
It's amazing because, like you said, that huge league. I got to know Brest very well during the
Yeah,
course of the Champions League campaign. What are you
it can
laughing
That's for
kill
for?
another
you.
podcast.
What are
It
you
can kill a
laughing
club.
for?
Girona are battered this season
Girona.
from
We
being.
went to see Girona
Yeah,
last year. It was great. You get to find different players, little gems that you didn't know before. You see them in the flesh for the first time. It's an amazing experience. You go to these places. These places these teams get to go to the Bernabeu or to Leipzig or to Bayern Munich or to Barcelona or to Liverpool. Or, it's just a great experience. PSG. It's a great experience, and I think the eight games in the Champions League now makes it even better for those teams that just about sneak in. So I'm fully on board with it. I think it'll be great, and I do hope actually that one of those teams makes it. Manchester United will only make it if they win the Europa League. But guess what? They won a game in the Premier League yesterday. They beat Leicester City, who are, well, absolutely dreadful. They beat them by 3-0. I mean, you have to say, Crick, that the cynical would suggest that if Garnacho and Højlund are ending their extensive goal droughts and Manchester United are scoring 3 goals and not conceding, how bad must Leicester be?
Well, yeah, that's the first thing that I wrote to our football editor when he told me that Rasmus Højlund had ended his goal drought. But I tell you what, he didn't take it like a man who was struggling in front of goal, did he?
No.
And struggling with confidence. It was a fine finish. And as poor as Leicester are, and I think Ruud van Nistelrooy will be regretting taking that job. Leicester will be regretting appointing him. It's actually 4 good performances in a row for Manchester United away from home in
Whoa.
Sociedad when they
Are you going to
when they
say
were
it?
when they were
Are
the
you going to
better
say
team.
it? Go
Arsenal at
on.
home when they were the better team against the supposed champions elect. Sociedad at home when they absolutely blew them away, and now this one. So maybe, I'm not going to say we're back, baby, but maybe this group of players are finally starting to learn what the manager wants from them, and they're finally starting to learn how to play his system. I thought it was a good performance from United, albeit against a terrible team. One of 3 terrible teams, by the way. Southampton,
yeah.
Leicester and Ipswich, as a collective, have been appalling.
Yep, agreed. Let's move on to Saturday's action now, starting at Portman Road. Yeah, Ipswich have been very poor this season, and a lot of criticism now starting to come their way after the expenditure that they spent in the summer. But I do think we should factor in the fact that they've jumped 2 leagues very quickly. But Nottingham Forest, I think probably best to focus on them, Terry. Absolutely terrific performance. And Morgan Gibbs-White obviously had a point to prove, didn't he? He was a bit, almost a little bit like, you left me out the England squad. I'm going to show you exactly what you're missing. So much so that by the end of the weekend, you will call me up, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah, he had a point to prove, but also how motivated are the Forest players? Where they're, for half a season, people saying they're not going to stay there, they're not going to stay in there. Now everyone seems to genuinely believe that Forest they're not falling out the top 4.
Well, they won't, will they?
And
Now, I mean,
no,
it would take a miracle for them to drop out the top 5.
the difference between them and Ipswich, I mean, Forest have spent money, but they've spent it wisely. And they're sort of smaller version of Chelsea, where at times in the last couple of years you've looked at Forest and thinking, well, what are they doing? How many players do they need? But it's settled down. They've got the right manager in charge, and there's a progressive club now that have really good players. Anthony Elanga is just clearly having the season of his life. Ipswich is just suddenly I've been aware of how much they've spent right throughout the season, and no one really talks about it. But when they're as bad as they are, when Leicester as bad as they are, when Southampton as bad as they are, questions are being asked. You're looking at 3 teams between them have spent over 200 million net, and they can't win a game of football. Leicester have gone 7 home games without scoring a goal and lost all 7. I mean, it's just those 3 are not competitive. This was done and dusted in 40 before half time. It was finished. Game over. Non-competitive. The Ipswich goals come late. They're consolations. I am mystified as to why you can spend so much money and not be competitive. Ipswich case, in this particular match you're looking at, they had a structure of buying better players from the Championship. It clearly doesn't work. It might be next season when they try and come back up, but 120 million, you should be able to buy a team that competes this season.
Yeah, but the Premier League is such a beast now. I don't think 120 million buys you that much. And I think maybe what they were doing was with squad building with a view to a longer term level of success rather than a short term jump up, quickly rush, let's stay there. Because you can make recruitment mistakes in that zone and it could end up backfiring. You end up saddled with people on long contracts that you don't want. And Ipswich were always going to struggle. I think they knew that no matter what happened. And the idea of having the fallback of having really good championship players so that next year they have a chance to assault the championship once again isn't the worst idea. I don't want to criticise them too much, but what I do want to do is really inflate the ego of Ross Wilson at Nottingham Forest, who, unlike the Chelsea sporting directors who seem to have spent loads and loads of money collecting loads of the players but not had a clear plan as to how they're going to work into a team, has actually got a brilliant way of getting all of the players that they've signed into a group that looks like they're going to get into the Champions League. And if you look at their squad or you look at the Chelsea squad, right? So you look at the team on Saturday and you then look at the bench that Nuno's got to operate with, and you think, wow, that's strong. That looks like a really well-made squad. Whereas you look at Chelsea and then you look at their bench that they've got, you think, why have they got 2 goalkeepers on the bench and loads of kids that we've never heard of? It doesn't make sense, right? So Ross Wilson, as much as we're having a go at the other two, does need a big sort of pat on the back.
He does, and he was at Southampton before that, and obviously they've got geniuses now in charge of that football club and recruitment, and I think that makes Ross Wilson look an even better sporting director. Their decline since he left.
Obviously in between time they had Jason Wilcox, and he's gone to Manchester United.
Yeah, which in itself is a worry when you look at Southampton's recruitment.
Oh dear! Do you know what? Me and Crook have spent the season basically trying to make each other feel worse.
I must admit, there's one thing. Why don't clubs that get promoted go heavy on the loan system? Now I know you can only have somebody from other Premier League clubs, but if you're going into the Premier League, you want players that played at the top flight. So that can be players that played in the top flight in France, in Spain, in Italy, in Germany, Belgium. You can get recognised top flight players instead of buying players that have never played in the top flight. They're playing in the Championship, playing in. So and then sort of progressing, trying to be competitive for a year. You might stay up. The second year you'll be stronger because there's 3 new teams coming up that might not be as good as you. It just seems it didn't have to be one way or the other for Ipswich, Southampton, and Leicester. Go and spend a lot of money. But that's buy players for the year after. It's just, I think that the promoted teams have been doing some work on the Championship. Leeds are clearly the best team in it. They are going to struggle next season unless they do something drastic as well. So you're seeing this bouncing of teams coming up and down. I'm looking at Leeds. I'm thinking, well, he played in the Premier League the last time. He wasn't particularly great. He wasn't particularly great. So why are they going to be any different next time they come up? So it's disappointing for the league as a whole that the 3 promoted teams are useless, basically, and not competitive. I mean, I've worked it out. They've played 87 games between them this year. They've 9 wins, accumulated 9 wins from 87 games.
It's awful. It's awful.
It's awful. Terrible. And it's no relegation battle. We haven't particularly got a league title race. It's all about Europe. And that's
We've got a race for 5th,
going.
Terry. We've got a race for 5th.
Spurs are in the race for 10th.
Are they?
No, I don't know. I just said on top of my head, finishing the top half. That's the big target. But it does make it's frustrating to see the money available to clubs that come in the Premier League. Don't blow it. Don't bankrupt the club, but be more competitive than the 3 we've got now.
Terry and I had a conversation earlier in the week in which we basically said that the job of a sporting director is really difficult to sort of assess. You can't tell whether or not one has done a good job or not. Because if there is a success at a club, then a sporting director who might have been there 2 years before says, yeah, well, I signed all those players. Right? And if you're a sporting director at a club 2 years ago and they go through a bad patch, the current sporting director will say, well, that's because he signed all those players 2 years ago. So if they just all keep moving every 2 or 3 years, then they can just do that sort of Spider-Man thing where they just sort of point the finger in the other direction and everybody takes credit and no one takes responsibility. It's terrific. It's like the best merry-go-round ever. Quickly, the best game of the weekend, by the way, we haven't mentioned it. The best game of the weekend was Manchester City against Brighton. It finished 2-2. It was a terrific football match. Brighton should have won it, didn't win it. But it was really competitive. And these two, whenever they play, I always think is just terrific. One of the best games in the Premier League I ever saw was when City had already won the Premier League down at Brighton, and they played a game. I think it was 1-1. Is it Enciso? But I always get confused. I think it was Enciso who scored that wonderful goal.
It was. He won the Puskás Award, didn't he?
He won the Puskás Award. It went into the top corner. It was that whole match was one of the best matches I've ever seen in the Premier League, and it meant nothing because neither team could go up or down in terms of placing. It was one of the last games of the season, but it was such a technically good game, tactically good game, and this was a little bit different. It wasn't technically brilliant, but it was full of incident. It was very, very exciting. So if you get the opportunity, the one thing I did this weekend was download the 90 minutes of that game to treat myself today because it's like a day off and watch the whole 90 minutes.
Enjoy.
Who wants to hang out with me?
That's no fun.
Yeah, what are you doing now, Crook? You're going to have fun, aren't you?
I'm off to the launch of the North versus South football match this summer. Now, I'm going to speak to John Terry about Chelsea. That'll be interesting, actually. I might put some of your points to him.
That would be a good idea. I'd like to know what he thought, although I think he's involved with the club, so he has to be a bit careful about what he says. Terry, what you got planned for the international break?
No, I'm pretty relieved to I've had 2 trips to Spain in the last couple of weeks. I did Let's Come Through Barcelona game last night, which is another podcast I'll be doing later.
What a game.
Yeah.
Well, you better plug your podcast and tell people to listen to that because that game is unreal, right?
Yep. So I've got work to do on that, and then just having a quick break over and watch the international games. Those that I can, of course. So, it's time to have a little break and reset, and then crack on again for the last part of the season where there's still a lot to play for. And Brighton, we're talking about Brighton, Man City. Brighton are a point behind City. City now has got a genuine problem because they're not particularly good. Can't stop Brighton can't stop conceding goals, and Brighton can pip them. And a Champions League spot for Man City is problematic now. It's not given.
So, but what about Brighton, Crook? What Brighton top 4? What do you reckon? What do you reckon?
I actually tipped up Newcastle for top 4, so you and I are going head to head on that as well.
Oh, I tipped Brighton at the beginning of the season, and Crookie went for Newcastle. So let's see what happens. We'll be back later in the week to preview the England games. Thomas Tuchel has done his first squad announcement. We spoke about it on Friday, but we'll go into more detail about it later in the week. I think we're going to do Wednesday podcast this week, so we've got a couple of days lead up to the England game on Friday, which is live on talkSPORT. And, of course, talkSPORT is the place to be for all of the latest news and reaction and the build-up to those big games against Albania and Latvia. Crook, have a good international break. Terry, we'll speak to you soon. And thank you for listening to Premier League All Access podcast. And well done, Newcastle United. Away the lads!